Welcome back to episode 2, where we're building a entire tabletop crafting project. Up first, I want to talk about different 3D tiles, because that's what we're going to be doing, is three-dimensional terrain. There are a lot of 3D tile options. However, crafting your own is really the cheapest, though not the easiest. There are a lot of things that I don't like about tabletop or about 3D tiles, modular tiles that are on the market right now. The one that most people know about is Dwarven Forge, just because it's on Critical Role and really well known for that. There's a WizKids tile as well that is roughly similar, a little bit cheaper. There's some other even cheaper stuff that you can get. If you're into 3D printing, there's OpenLock, I think is what it's called. The big problems that I have is all of those tiles are roughly the same. They've got big walls and they've got a small grid. These things are fine if that's what you like. There's nothing wrong with them. I just don't like the way they're built. They can look really cool, but they only look really cool, in my opinion, for like diorama setups, which isn't what we're doing. We need this to be playable. And I don't think most existing tiles are terribly playable. They're also stupid expensive for the most part. The 3D print ones, you can get them all for free on Thingiverse and then 3D print them, but they have some of the same problems. Two of the biggest problems is they have a 1-inch grid and the walls are really tall. I'm going to show you what that looks like down at the table. I need to move my box and my supplies. Pardon me a moment. I should have cleaned up after the last episode, but I'm a messy bitch. Ugh. Damn hormones stealing on my muscles. So first off, let's talk the walls. Here are some mock-ups that I did. Most 3D tiles that you get are going to have full height modular tiles. They're going to be a 2-inch by 2-inch piece, and they'll have full height walls, which is a 2-inch high wall. Most miniatures this size, this is a 28mm miniature, which is kind of normal for tabletop games. There are some games that have slightly larger 32 millimeter. Come on, focus. 32 millimeter. Hopefully this thing will focus here in a second. Either way, they all have a 1-inch grid. There are some, I think this one is 38 millimeter, which this has a 1¼ inch grid, so they have a harder time fitting on this sort of thing, but most games aren't going to use miniatures that size. Or at least most of the, come on, focus. Most of the stuff that we're going to be doing, or that we're talking about, doesn't have, I don't know what's going on with the focus. Anyway, so I don't like these full height walls. So I made a couple mock-ups that have different height walls so that we can kind of see what we like best. Now we definitely don't like the 2-inch height walls, and let me show you. If you're looking at it from the side, like this, you can't see the model at all. You can't see the model at all. And because it's so big, not only can you not see, it's really easy to knock into, and I really hate that. There are some tiles that offer, I think they call them half-height walls, which is a 1-inch wall, like this. This one I'm not as mad at, because the miniature, you can still see it over the wall, like so. But I still think it's a little too tall. So I also tried out a 1/2 inch wall, which I think I like a lot more. I think I like this a lot more. Yeah, I should have practiced holding these. Yeah, I think I like this a lot more because you can see the model. It still gives you the impression of a wall. And that's a big thing, is we're working, any type of tile is a bit of an abstraction anyway. So we don't need a full height wall in order to kind of have a good like theater of the mind type experience. Not theater of the mind experience. That's not whatever. It doesn't matter.
Don't worry about it.
We can give the impression of a wall, and it works just as well for our imagination. And personally, I think a smaller wall like this works better for the imagination because you can see the whole room. Now, there are a lot of tabletop crafting got started with DM Scotty, which I think his channel is called the Tabletop Crafters Guild. I'll put a link in the description. There's also a Facebook group. But he does what's called, or he popularized what's called 2.5D, which is 1/4-inch walls. Wylock from Wylock's Armory, I think, also does 1/4-inch walls. I don't recall exactly. I don't like the 1/4-inch walls. I think they're a little too small because I want to be able to put, I'll show you on the 1-inch. I want to be able to put interior details on here so that, you know, we get the impression of what kind of wall is everyone standing next to. Is it like a brick wall? Is it a stone wall? Is it like a, what is it called? I think it's called wattle and dab. And I don't think this 1/4-inch wall, you can really get that impression. And I'm not sure if we can with this 1/2-inch wall either. I don't know if I'm going to like that. Maybe we could do like a 3/4-inch wall. I didn't think to try and put one of those on. You know, let's do it real quick. Let me set up my my stuff. So I'll take a piece of single corrugated and we will mark it. Hey, is that yours? That is not your marker. My fucking cat loves office supplies for some reason. I moved my shit all around, so for this video, so I'm not sure where anything is. All right, so we're gonna do, these are 2 inches. So we're gonna mark 2 inches. And we're going, what did I say, 3/4 of an inch? That's there. I found marking every 1 inch makes it so the so it doesn't drift, because quite often I'll have to get to, it happened a lot when I was doing these mock-ups, where I get to the end and like it would be all off. So if I mark out every 1 inch, then when I go to do the final line across it, it lines up better. Because, as I said in the last episode, I have no talent and less patience. Cool. There's that, and now I'll just cut it out with some scissors. I saved most of my offcuts except for a little scrap like that. You will need a trash receptacle handy when you do this. Cool. Is this hot? Yep. Alright. We're just going to tack it on. I'm not going to bother to be super efficient about this. I also cut the fuck.
Remember, fingers at the burning.
I also cut the cardboard wrong. I'll get into how to cut the cardboard next time. And that is a horrible glue job. Alright, just hold it for a second. Alright, that's probably good enough. So, I don't hate the the amount of kind of real estate that we've got inside. I think it gives us the same kind of good real estate as the 1-inch side. Gives us kind of enough to work with and have decoration, whatever, inside. But let's see what it looks like if it's too tall. I don't mind looking over it personally. I think that might be a good... I'll get used to using this phone eventually. I think that might be a good alternative. We'll do a couple like prototype tiles once we get up to the episode where we're crafting tiles, and we'll be able to tell what we like at that point and what we don't like. Also, I never should have placed my glue gun like that. Safety first, kids. Let's talk grid size, and we'll explain, or I'll explain why I'm making this decision. Alright, so we're going to take a look at these tiles. These are a 1 1/4 inch grid as opposed to a 1-inch grid. Now, in person, they look a tiny bit large, but I sit next to a 1-inch grid all the time, so my eye can spot a 1-inch grid pretty quickly and easily. When you're at the table, especially if you're with people who aren't like into crafting, then it doesn't really look any different. And the only time you can really tell the difference is if you place it next to something that's a 1-inch grid. You can really see how much smaller this is. There are, I saw some people online who like to play or like to craft with a 1 1/2 inch grid. I think this is way too big. It's just, it gets so roomy. I'm not a fan. So we're not going to do that. We're going to go with the 1 1/4 inch grid. So let me explain the benefits of this. One of the big things is the 1-inch grid with this one. I don't know why I took care of it or put it away. A lot of miniatures spill over the sides of their base. So you've got something like this that's a 1-inch base. Get something like this, it's a 1-inch base. It completely fills the space. But there are a lot of models that spill over the bases, which is fine. I don't have an issue with it. It makes the models look cool. Like this Drake spills over it. Let me move it under a little bit better so you can see it top down. Yeah, so it goes over the sides, and as soon as you put characters on there trying to like fight it, especially when you try and like move them, it becomes really difficult. It's easy to knock stuff around, and I hate it. However, if you go with a 1 1/4 inch grid, like so, then it still has a little bit of overspill, but you've got enough that it doesn't get crowded. You know, you can have the same kind of setup. You can move the minis around. The tiles that we make are going to be a lot heavier and more stable than this. These are just mock-ups for demonstration purposes. But yeah, so you can move stuff around, makes things way easier. When we talk about walls in just a minute, you'll see another benefit of the 1 1/4 inch grid. I've found with the 1-inch grid, because that's what I primarily play with, is a 1-inch grid, and I found that it gets a little crowded, especially when you've got a lot of stuff going on, and I hate that. It's kind of immersion breaking when everything's just all clustered together. With this, I think this makes the game a lot more playable and makes everything just more fun. One of the other benefits of the 1 1/4 inch grid versus the 1-inch grid is as you scale up model sizes, it seems to me, once you scale up model sizes, that the problem of crowding will get better. Oh, let me show you one of the biggest offenders of overspill are these gargoyles that I have. These things are nearly 2 inches across, but they sit on a 1-inch space. If you put them over on this, you can see that while they still overspill quite a bit, it's not nearly as much an issue. So as you scale up, the problem of overcrowding gets worse with a 1-inch grid, but as best I can tell from all my test stuff, the problem actually gets better with a 1¼ inch grid. And the best way I can show you that is with this Baylor. This is one of my favorite models that I've painted. Anyway, so this has a 3-inch base, but it across is a lot wider than that, which actually, let me see how far across it is. Like 5 inches or so. So it's quite large. And you can probably extrapolate out, this is a 3-inch base. If you try and put models around this, try and put walls or terrain around this, it gets very crowded very quickly. However, it's going to overspill these tiles a little bit, but you'll get my point. When you put it on this sort of thing, you actually have a lot more space around it to use. And as you scale up to stuff that's even larger, do I have anything larger handy? I don't have anything larger than a 3-inch base right now, but you just end up with a lot more space. And the more you scale up, if you got something with, say, a 5-inch base, it's going to be a lot more manageable because it extrapolates out. Anyway, that's where I was going with that. Now let's talk wall placement and how we're going to construct the tiles. Now, what do I do with my spare wall? This is my spare wall, or my test wall. You know, I got 2 of these. Where's the other one? I don't know where my other one went, so we're going to use the soft cut. Nope, that offcut's not going to work. Hang on a sec. This one should work. This one's a little too mangled on one end. You can see what I mean about scissors kind of mangling up double corrugated, but for these kind of demonstration purposes, it doesn't really matter. Cool. So what we're going to do, double corrugated cardboard is 1/4 inch thick. And you're going to start to understand why we're going with 1¼ inch squares here in a minute. Now, one of the easiest ways that you can do to make tiles is to attach the cardboard to the side. It doesn't interfere with your grid at all as far as the overflow. And you need to do this on 1-inch grids, which I'll show you in a minute. But the problem with attaching it to the sides is once you start compiling tiles, your grid, it breaks the grid, which I hate. So what we're going to be doing is attaching it on the tile, and then when you put the tiles together, it doesn't break the grid. And that's the benefit of the 1¼ inch squares, is when you attach something that's 1/4 inch across, you still have, or 1/4 inch wide, you still have 1 inch for your model. And this doesn't work in a 1-inch grid, because once it's on there, that 1-inch grid is now only 3/4 inch, and your model doesn't fit anymore. This gets particularly egregious when you have 2 walls for like a 10-foot corridor. This thing is so mangled, those scissors. Anyway, when you have a 10-inch corridor, or a 10-foot corridor, a 2-inch corridor, the models with a 2-inch base straight up doesn't fit. However, with the 1¼ inch, once you place the walls, it's going to remove 1/2 inch total from your 2 inches across, or from your 2.5 inches across. So you still end up with 2 inches in the middle, and a 2-inch base model fits just fine. The only time that this doesn't really work is if you got a 1 square across tile. Once you put 2 walls on it makes the space inside 3/4 of an inch, and then your 1-inch mini doesn't fit. The only solution I can think of is if you're doing something like this, to just chop it down the middle, don't put walls on it, or a butt up against it, something that does have a wall on both sides. Well, that's a bad example because you can't see anything. But something up against it that does have walls, or you can just leave it blank. No one's going to care. As I like to say, it does not matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So that's how we're going to be making... actually, you know what? Let's go back up to the camera. That's going to be our... Why does nothing focus today? Whatever. It doesn't matter.
Danny, don't worry about it.
That's going to be our methodology. That's it for today. Next time, I'm going to tell you how to get into all this for as cheap as humanly possible. So, I'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, check out the entire playlist right here. Bye.